Let's talk about the new Canon 28-70 f2 lens. A lens like this has never existed before. It's only for the new Canon EOS R mirrorless camera, and it's that mirrorless design and the shortened flange distance that really allows this design to exist. I talked to the engineers about it for a little while, and they could have made like an EF DSLR lens that was 28-70 f2, but they said it would have just been extremely large to work around getting around that mirror space in there. So I think we're going to see a lot of kind of cool, never before seen lenses that the mirrorless designs will allow to happen. I spent a few hours with this lens. I don't have it right now, so I can't physically show it to you, but I can give you sharpness information and my general impressions of it. I know people are eager to kind of decide whether they want to pre-order it or not. It is $3,000. That's like a lot, especially for just a normal zoom lens. But like I said, nothing like this has ever existed before, but you can order it there. I also want to point you at sdp.io/free SDP, where we're giving away a Canon EOS R or Fujifilm X-T3. Full disclosure, the only way I was able to test this lens was to have Canon fly me out to Hawaii and participate in their press event. Otherwise, I simply would not have been able to touch it, or you would have had to wait much longer. Here are the main benefits of this f2 lens. In low light, it means you're going to be gathering twice as much light. So if you are struggling with the amount of noise that are in your images when shooting in low light, like wedding receptions, for example, then this will basically reduce the noise in half. That's a big deal. It'll also allow you to separate the subjects more at a given focal range and distance to the subject. So just your subjects will pop a little bit more. It's a look that you would have to have used primes to get in the past. This is fantastic for low light events, like those wedding receptions, like the first dance. It's also kind of the perfect lens for sports like basketball and volleyball, where you're working up close on the sidelines of the court. Right now, most photographers would use primes, but that means either you're cropping down when the subject is too far away, or you're having to switch bodies to a wider prime, like a 24mm prime, when the action gets nice and close. So for a lot of sports photographers, they'll be willing to go from like an f1.4 prime to an f2 zoom, to not have to be able to change lenses, to not have to crop, because it's just going to improve their photography. It's a very practical thing to these people. This lens is massive. It's massive. It's so big, it fails the can you walk around in public without people commenting on it test. And as I walked around, I had a lot of people being like, whoa, that is a big camera. It's that big. It's disturbingly big. It's eye-catchingly big. The front filter is 95 millimeters. I wish they'd given us a rear filter on this, but I think it's just all packed with glass. There probably wasn't any kind of room. It is solid and sealed. It doesn't feel metal. It feels like plastic on the outside, but trust me, it's solid, heavy, and sealed up. It is extremely sharp. It's the sharpest zoom we've ever tested, and I'll show you some results in just a second. It's fast, and by that I mean it focuses fast and it gathers twice as much light as comparable f2.8 zooms. It has a nice control ring on the front that allows you to adjust different settings in the EOS R camera, so you could use it to adjust the aperture, the ISO, or several other things, and it's unstabilized. And this is kind of a big deal, and it's going to be a deal breaker for a lot of people. The Canon EOS camera does not have sensor stabilization, and this lens does not have any image stabilization built in, and that means camera shake is going to be a problem. Bokeh. You can see the bokeh has a little bit of a hard edge to it. As we start to move out towards the edges of the frame, the bokeh does take on a cat's eye effect. The lens itself has 9 aperture blades, so it should be fairly smooth even when it's shut down a little bit. And let me say that I've never had a client compliment or complain about the bokeh of a lens. The only people who care about bokeh are camera snobs. To emphasize the importance of this speed drop to f2, I want to give you some examples. Going from f2.8 to f2, like going from the 24-70 f2.8 to this f2 lens, is going to provide similar results to dropping your ISO from ISO 6400 to ISO 3200, because you can keep the same shutter speed and drop your ISO down. And that is going to reduce the noise in your images by half. That is a real big deal. That is like upgrading your camera body from APS-C to full frame. It is like upgrading from your full frame camera to a medium format camera. I don't know why we don't put more emphasis on faster lenses. Instead, everybody's always excited about the like 1/10 of a stop performance improvement that they get with some new generation of camera sensor. This will give you a full stop of improvement for real. And that takes 7 or 8 years of sensor development to reach. Comparing the 28-70 f2 to the 24-70 f2.8 Mark II from Canon, first of all, the 24-70 f2.8 Mark II has been our favorite lens in this range. We found it to be vastly sharper than the Nikon 24-70, either the stabilized or unstabilized latest versions. We found it to be much sharper than the Sony 24-70 f2.8 G Master. And in fact, while we shoot a lot of Sony bodies, we generally will put that on an adapter on our Sony body because it's better. It's just plain sharper across the frame. The 28-70 f2 is $3,000 compared to $1,700 for the Canon f2.8 lens. The 28-70 is vastly bigger and more noticeable. The 24-70 has always been heavy, but it will seem small and discreet. The 95mm filter size is much bigger than the 82mm filter size, but you get a full stop of extra speed. You care about that or you don't. You can decide. The 28-70 has a control ring. If you were to put the 24-70 on an adapter, you could get the adapter with the control ring, but the adapter control ring is placed really close to the body, and that makes it kind of awkward to use. It's definitely better to have the control ring out towards the edge because that's just where your fingers are going to be normally. The 24-70 f2.8 is vastly superior at 24mm, which the 28-70 simply can't do. You should go through your pictures and see how many of them are taken at 24mm because you won't be able to do that. There's a noticeable difference between 24 and 28mm. Whether you can work around this or not really depends on your own shooting style. Of course, the 24-70 f2.8, you can use it on any of the Canon EF bodies, any of the DSLRs, whereas the 28-70 f2 can only be used on one camera right now, the Canon EOS R. Sharpness. At 28mm in f2.8, the 28-70 is sharper across the frame, especially in the corners. At 70mm in f2.8, the 28-70 is again sharper across the frame, especially in the corners. It blew away the 24-70 workhorse. I've tested every normal zoom against the Canon 24-70 Mark II, and it's always the sharpest, but the 28-70 is the new benchmark. What about those of you weighing the 24-105 f4 versus this f2 lens? Or perhaps you're looking at the Nikon Z, they only came out with a 24-70 f4 at this time. To jump to f2 is a 2-stop difference. That means you're gathering 4 times more light. That means you can drop from ISO 6400 to ISO 1600, where you'll have about a quarter the visible light. That will give you similar results to upgrading from a micro four thirds sensor to a full frame sensor, or from upgrading from your full frame sensor to a full-on large format sensor. Let's compare the 28-70 f2 to the Canon 24-105 f4, the other zoom for the Canon EOS R lens. Of course, the f2 lens is $3,000 versus an $1,100 add-on to the kit. And the 28-70 is far bigger and heavier. The 24-105 is actually a good walking around lens. It takes reasonably sized filters, but it's 2 stops slower than the f2 lens. So if you're shooting in low light and you can't lower your shutter speed, like if you're shooting sports or events, then the 28-70 f2 is going to give you 4 times cleaner images, or a faster shutter speed, whichever you prefer. But the 24-105 f4 has image stabilization, and we find it's good to about 5 stops. So if you're shooting still life, something where you can slow the shutter speed down, you're actually going to get cleaner images out of the 24-105 f4. Now, assuming you are hand holding it and you can't use a tripod. So it makes it kind of a hard choice. I expected the 28-70 f2 to be far sharper than 24-105 f4 because this one is cheaper, and usually there's a correlation there. But I was shocked the 24-105 f4 is about as sharp as a 28-70 f2. And if you're using the transitive property of math, that means that yes, it's actually sharper than the Canon 24-70 Mark II that we've all been using for weddings and events and stuff. The thing that was the benchmark. So I will do a separate review on the 24-105 f4. That's a bit of a teaser, but yeah, it's sharper than the Canon 24-70 Mark II f2.8 lens. And of course, the 24-105 wins at those ranges where the 28-70 can't zoom, like at the wide end and at the long end. Taking a look at the sharpness, you can see at 28mm at f4, at f2.8, at f2, the sharpness is about the same. Zooming into 70mm, again, the sharpness is about the same. So don't get the 28-70 f2 for the sharpness, get it for the extra speed. A lot of people are asking, why didn't you test f8, f16, f22? And the answer is, you're going to see diminishing differences because of diffraction, and it doesn't really matter that much. I mean, this is the answer. If you use a higher f-stop, you lose all the benefits of shooting at f2, so it doesn't matter that much. Here's the thing. Diffraction is a property of light. It is physics. As light passes near that iris, it bends a little bit. And the smaller and smaller it gets, the higher the percentage of the light that's passing through the lens is passing close enough to the iris that diffraction is going to steer it in the wrong direction, and that just generally reduces sharpness. Higher f-stops will almost always give you lower levels of sharpness, especially on pro glass, which tends to have a sweet spot wide open. So as we raise the f-stop numbers, the differences between the expensive lenses and the cheap lenses will always disappear. If you're planning on usually shooting at f8, then it doesn't really matter. Get the cheap lens. I also want to say, Canon, you introduced a couple of ultra pro lenses, this and the 50mm f1.2, and I'm excited about it as a working pro, but where is the pro body? You gave us a self-proclaimed consumer body with this high-end pro glass. You're teasing us a little bit. I know the pro bodies are going to come and they'll be a great match with this, but it's a hard sell to tell somebody to get this consumer level body without a thumbstick, without a second memory card slot, and put a $3,000 lens on it, because like you're not going to shoot a basketball game going to this single card slot unless you're like really a risk taker. Pick up the 28-70 f2 at sdp.io/C28. If you have follow-up questions about it, we'll be able to do a deeper review of it soon. Thank you very much.